conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, school choice passes, big news of the day. We're going to go over the actual floor debate that occurred tomorrow, because it was like a 2.5, 3 hour long debate. There's a lot to dig into what they said, but there was some interesting parts to it that we will be going over. But today, I thought I would just go over kind of the merits of the bill, the process of the bill coming forward, because that's a story in and of itself that's worth discussing. Why some people that are for school choice might even be against this bill passing. We're against this bill passing. So we'll be going over that. Also, just a news point, the budget passed out of the Senate. So now that moves on to conference committee and then to concurrence. So I'll be going over probably the budget tomorrow as well, if we have time as we dig into school choice tomorrow. But also, we see the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife is in the headlines, and you may be wondering what's all that hoopla about. We also are seeing that the Horse Racing Commission, in a similar situation as Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, as both are being attempted to be moved to the Department of Agriculture and be under the control of the Ag Commissioner, and then have the Senate in charge of approving for the board appointments. Well, the Senate's already in charge of Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife's appointments, but also now in charge of the commission, approving the commission appointments for horse racing. And I'm also going to be digging into just what a trash bill, House Bill 695, is. It was in discussion. The House Education Committee this week passed out a committee, but it's one dumpster fire of a bill that I think really needs to be dealt with and provides us a perfect case study of just how the lobbying structure works up in Frankfort. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. Before we dig into all those great stories, though, I do have an update on Tonya Fogle. So some of you may remember the story from earlier in the week. Tonya Fogle was arrested on Sunday for trespassing in an AT&T store after she caused, as the police report says, a ruckus. It doesn't say ruckus, but alluding to she's causing a ruckus in the store, was asked to leave. The police had to show up and remove her. She was refusing to leave, acting, according to the police report, in a dramatic and negative manner that led to two officers being needed to pull her together and arrest her. Well, she has spoken out about that. She actually shot a live while she was sitting inside the store when she first showed up. That kind of goes over. So what her story is, she showed up at the store because there had been a bunch of iPhones added to her account months ago or upgraded on her account, and she had contacted the fraud department at AT&T, and she claims it has been 2 months since she's heard back from them. That's possible. I think she's probably exaggerating, but it's possible. You know, cell phone companies, as always, kind of suck, and I don't fault her there. But she went into the store, and to give us some idea of what was going on, here is the live. She shot live. I'm going to play you just a little portion of what she said. This was before the police showed up.
Hey, Lexington, this is your girl. This is your girl, Councilmember Fogle. I'm sitting over there at the ATM store trying to get some help on some fraudulent charges that happened on my account. And so I've got two attendants here who's working in the store. They're saying they can't help me. I've notified the fraud department, but the fraud department hasn't called me back. They're saying they can't help me because they're retail. They're not working toward the. So what am I supposed to do with AT&T? It feels like AT&T is the scammers because I've been 2 months trying to get some help with my account. Now my phone is not working and I need to use my phone to do my business. And I'm getting over on Richmond Road at the AT&T store, 130 Richmond Road. Of course I'm upset.
She said, of course I'm upset there at the end. And I understand you'd be upset. You know, you're dealing with your phone, but you know, it is funny in the video. She does claim that her phone isn't working and she needs it. But I do wonder how she doing a Facebook Live on the phone that isn't working. Because clearly she has AT&T now. She did that as a live on her cell phone that requires internet connection service to work. So I don't exactly understand claim her phone doesn't work. Maybe she means something else doesn't work on it, but for some reason Facebook and Live are working. But let's lay this out. So she walks into this Richmond store. Now, something to understand about cell phone stores is they could be, especially if they're not corporate stores, what's called an authorized retailer store. And those are stores that aren't actually part of AT&T. They just have an agreement with AT&T where they can sell their plans, phones, and as such, and they receive commissions for doing so. So she walks into a store that's possibly, I didn't look to see if the Richmond was an authorized retailer or not. You can go look. It's probably on their door that they're not. And said, look, I have an issue with this fraud situation. And they told her, apparently, clearly, like, we can't help you. We can't help you. We can't, that's not us. We can't do that. You have to deal with, calling corporate to deal with that. We just don't have the tools at our disposal. So she kind of got an answer. They can't help her. And so apparently she's asked them. They told her they can't help her. They then apparently are in the back. She then records this live for 3 minutes, right, where she's calling them out and everything else. And that's what she's doing on the live. We have no idea what she's not doing on the live because, chances are it's probably not being very quiet. So put yourself in position of AT&T. You got a situation you literally can't deal with, and a person's just upset loudly, at least filming videos in your store, talking about how awful you are. You, as a business, are like, I kind of need you to move along. Can you please leave? And apparently they asked her to, and she didn't leave. And so that live ended after about 3 minutes, and then it took another 7 minutes. She was still there 7 minutes later, and that's when the police showed up. Like, we already know they can't help you. They already told you they can't help you. I don't know what you're still doing there. 7 minutes later after you've ended a live talking about, I need corporate numbers and everything else she's talking about. But here she is talking about the incident on LEX 18. Let's take a listen here.
I'm pushing out to get ready to go. I'm walking really slow. I stopped to ask another customer service what was his name. He gave me his name. I took a picture of him. I'm just a few feet from the door, when all of a sudden I feel this arm push me.
So you've already been asked to leave. Like, this is to me the most obvious thing. And Fogle needs to be real careful about her claims, because remember, body cam footage does exist. So you've already been asked to leave. They've asked you to leave. The police now are called to show up. They ask you to leave. This isn't picture taking time. You've been trespassed. You're not legally allowed there anymore. It's so bad they had to call the police out to remove you. I mean, imagine you got somebody on your property. You have to call the cops out, and the cops tell them, please leave. And they're still not walking out. Instead, they're sitting there still talking to you and taking photos of you on their way out. Now, she went on to say that her and the officer had a prior interaction a while back. And what was happening there? Well, in her words, she was defending unhoused people who were facing arrest for loitering and disturbing the peace, aka also known as a type of trespassing, a type of private property rights. And she was defending the unhoused people, who, by the way, aren't her constituents because they don't actually live in the district, so they don't actually vote for her. But anyways, She's defending her constituents against police action that was being carried out on behalf of her constituents that are trying to protect their private property. She's already established with this prior interaction with this officer, she has no understanding of private property rights at all. And this officer knows that, apparently. And that just goes to the point I made when I originally talked about this. This officer sitting there, you have a black city council woman who you know is a city councilwoman because you've had interactions with her before as a police officer. You would literally be trying to do anything you could not to arrest her. And I got a feeling when the body cam footage comes out about this, it ain't going to look good on her part. I got a big feeling it ain't going to look good. Well, coming up after this, we'll be digging into House Bill 695. House Bill 695. That was discussed in committee about establishing an adaptive kindergarten readiness pilot project. We'll be going over that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. So earlier this week in the House Education Committee, we had House Bill 695 heard in committee. And 695, what it's attempting to do is set up some sort of pilot program for them to try out this service that provides interactive computer modules to the parents of these kids. And it's a pilot to see if it's worth the state funding more. I mean, it's real questionable, but this hearing starts off pretty odd. I'll kind of go into more about what the project's actually doing. We actually will hear from the representative on that in committee. I'll play for you what he said. The talking points are in his words, but already kind of starts off odd. And this tells you that this is going to be one doozy of a committee hearing. So this is how Kevin Jackson, the representative, how he starts off his hearing.
Thank you, Chairman Tipton and members of the Education Committee, my friends on the Education Committee. Remember that when you vote. But just want to say thank you for letting us present House Bill 495. And Mr. Chairman, there is a committee sub.
What kind of comment is that? But you start off by saying, my friends on the committee, remember that when you vote. Who votes for a bill? Like, this is the very problem. Like, who votes for a bill based upon whether or not, actually, no, he hasn't been in there very long at all. He's been in there for one term. This is his second year. So who starts off that way? Saying, my friends on the committee, remember that how you vote. Is that how you think of legislation? I vote for it because I like the person who put it forward. Not, is it a good bill? Is it a bad bill? But do I like the person or not? I mean, this is the problem that's going on in our legislature. You should never be voting on a bill because the person who sponsored it is your friend. I find that comment maybe more bothersome than most, maybe more bothersome than I should, but I just think it's highly annoying, and it really points to a big problem and a big issue we have in our more establishment legislators like Kevin Jackson, where they think friendships matter more than the content of the bill you're presenting. Remember that when you vote, that we're friends. So if it's a dumpster fire, I still expect you to vote for it because that's what friends do, right? Anyways, let's hear what he has to say about the bill, what the bill actually does, his quote-unquote talking points, as he calls them.
And here's some talking points about House Bill 695. The project will run for 2 school years, 24-25, 25-26, if funds are available. Eligible children include 4 and 5-year-olds who are not yet enrolled in kindergarten. There will be an application process from across Kentucky looking to attract at least 400 kids in the pilot program. The project will use family engagement to deliver age-appropriate reading instruction with an online learning platform. Recommended 20 minutes per day. It'll offer optional instruction in math and science if wanted. It'll align with state standards and national guidelines and assist children with disabilities in preparing for kindergarten. This project will reserve 40% of its slots for children from families up to 200% of the federal poverty level and areas of persistent poverty. Students from families with incomes below 400% of the federal poverty level will receive a computer or tablet and internet access if needed and at no cost to the family for the duration of the participation.
So let me summarize that down into what this bill is. So they're trying to create a pilot project to test the outcome of, to figure out if they want to expand this out into the future, for them to provide free computers and internet access to anybody who's 400% of poverty or lower. We'll be getting to what that means in a second. So provide them internet access and computers so they will log on with their parents, 4 and 5-year-olds, and at least 400 of them. So they'll log on with their parents to this module that's being provided to them That's 20 to 30 minutes a day, and they will sit with their kid for 20 to 30 minutes a day on this computer watching this module program. I'm going to tell you this much right now. If this passes, it is bound to expand. They're going to get crazy high results from this. Why? Because let's think of the behavior of the parents who do it. And by that, I mean the types of parents. Because what really dictates the outcome of a child overall, their educational success, so on and so forth, is a lot of the involvement of the parents. It's nothing the government does, it's nothing the school does. It's the amount that the parents are involved. This is a plain fact. And what it's calling for you to do as a parent is to sit down with your kid 20, 30 minutes a day. So in order to enroll in the program, you have to be the type of parent that'd be willing to sit down with their child 20, 30 minutes a day so you guys can go through a computer module together. That type of parent, the type of parents who would enroll their kids in this are guaranteed, those kids are guaranteed to be better. Because they have a parent who cares enough to sit with them for 20 to 30 minutes. It doesn't matter. You don't need to add in the government funding. These kids are probably already going to do pretty well. Because this parent already would be sitting down with them 20, 30 minutes a day. You think that what their limited access is, I don't know where to do it. Also, I don't get a computer or internet access. But if the government provides me a program that's free, even though you can find tons of free programs, but if the government provides me a free program, computer, and internet, well, then that's the thing stopping me from caring about my kid's education. Then I would be willing to sit down with my kid 20, 30 minutes a night and help them learn to read. Of course not. These are the same type of parents already going to sit down with their kids 20, 30 minutes a night and help them read. And what are they going to be compared to? Are you going to have a control program, a control group that enrolls in this is the type that would sign up? And then you say, okay, these few hundred that tried to sign up, we're going to not give them the program. So you signed up, but we chose you to not do the program. So we're going to follow up to see how your kid did. Well, that already taints the test, the experiment here. It already does. Because those parents are going to be like, well, I didn't get it. And then I feel discouraged. I don't know what to do. They offered this to me. I didn't take it. So I guess I'll just give up. Like that will be the mindset of a lot of parents. So if this passes, it's going to expand. We know it's going to expand because how can't it? How can't it? Also going back to 400% of poverty level gets a free computer or tablet. How much money is 400% of poverty level, you may ask? Well, for a family of three, that's a husband, a mother, and a kid, or maybe a mother and two kids, but a husband, a mother, and a kid. 400% of poverty is $103,280. So you're clearing over $100,000 a year as a family, and you get a free computer and internet for taking part in this. Now, if this was targeting kids with no options at all, you know, keep in mind, they said only 40% are saved for kids in poverty. The other 60%, well, they can be much, much more. In fact, they can be from families making over $100,000 a year even, and well beyond that. So if you didn't do it, though, with only those kids below poverty level, it wouldn't look so good on paper, would it? Because a bunch of people would maybe sign up for the free computer and the internet and then not do it. You'd run that risk. So you want to make sure it looks good. So let's get the middle class families in here. So that way we can make sure we offset this. Because once again, this is going to the quality of the parents. I'm not saying that lower class parents aren't good parents. They can be absolutely 100% fantastic parents. The household I grew up in for a long time when I was a kid would have been considered in the lower class. One parent worked, the other parent went to college, or they both kind of worked. My mom was a trucking dispatcher and my dad was, worked on a landscape crews for a city, and they took turns going to college, and, my grandmother even lived with us to help them afford their home. Like, that's the family I grew up in. It wasn't like we were middle class, our entire life. Now, they climbed the ladder and they got up there, but they weren't the entire time. So you can have good parents that care. They're trying to make it in this world. But at the same hand, they're trying to make this look as good as possible to expand it out. Now, there's a second guy sitting at the table. And this is really a great case study in exactly how money and lobbyists is running our government. Because the second guy at the table is a lobbyist from a company called Frost Brown Todd. If you've never heard of Frost Brown Todd, I don't blame you, but people in Kentucky politics has definitely heard of him. For an example, former Secretary of State Trey Grayson works at Frost Brown Todd. And so there's a lot of former politicians, current politicians that have connections to Frost Brown Todd. And so he's sitting at that table for the hearing, and you might wonder, what's he doing there? This guy from Frost Brown Todd, this lobbyist group, there's this lobbyist actually sitting at the table. Well, we're going to be going over that after this short break, because this is, like I said, this is a case study in how lobbying just runs our government. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. If you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email me at info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. I've been getting a lot of emails from y'all. I certainly appreciate it, and hopefully I'm covering some of these things for y'all. But if you have suggestions, ideas, things you want to see covered, go ahead and email me once again at info@theandrewshow.com. We'll be back here in a few short minutes. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before the break, I was digging into this House Bill 695. And we were going over what the bill does. It's a trash fire. It's a dumpster fire. What it's doing is providing modules for parents on computers for them to do with their 3 and 4-year-olds 20 to 30 minutes a night. And the government wants to pay for it. Give out free computers, give out free internet, and then also put these kids on these modules early on and see what that does for early childhood education. And they're doing this pilot program, which already, as I said priorly, is destined to expand, because of course they're going to have great outcomes, because they're the type of parents that opt into a pilot program where they have to sit on a computer 20, 30 minutes a night with their child learning how to read. Like, that's a parent who's already going to have a pretty successful child, most likely. But I was pointing out that at the table was this guy from Frost Brown Todd, a lobbying group, and he was a question was asked, and he went to answer, and I think this is just real perfect. It's just real perfect to explain how the lobbying and donation, how this runs our government, but this is what he said.
And I represent one of the entities in this space, and their experience with this technology is right on point with your question. They see the best results when the platform is used at home with an engaged parent or caregiver to run them through that daily 15 to 20 minute module.
First off, of course, that's when they see the best results, because the parent is already a caring parent that's probably worried about all kinds of things, nutrition, reading, everything. You know, just the fact you've given them a 15-minute module a night, like I said, that isn't exactly very good evidence that your module is the key to success for them. But putting that to the side, what did he say? He said, the client I represent is in this space. So he's at this table helping present this bill that he's lobbying on. And the reason why he's lobbying on it is because the company that has hired them to be lobbyists is the company that will get to administer this pilot program. They would be the ones paid by your tax dollars to try out this pilot program. And if it goes well, which it will, because they've set it up for success, it's guaranteed to go well how they're doing it. Then when it gets expanded out, they will get the contract for the entire state. So you got lobbyists sitting there representing somebody who will personally profit from this passing. And this is how the lobbying cycle works. Just look at Frost Brown Todd. This is the lobbyist group that's sitting at the table there. Now, in 2022, that was the last General Assembly election year. 2 state candidates, they gave, and this is in personal donations from people employed by Frost Brown Todd. So these are people giving money at the state level to state candidates that say their employer is Frost Brown Todd. So just in the year 2022, individually, they gave $71,159.83. That's just directly from them, not to mention all the PACs that they control or have influence in, the PACs that their employers dump money into, that then they basically direct for them in their political fights. That's why I call these investments not donations. Frost Brown Todd makes these investments, hundreds of thousands of dollars, in donations to these candidates. They then pull them up at the table to sit there and get a bill passed that directly profits the people who hire them. This is the cycle. This is why I call it investments and not donations. So how do we kill this bill? Well, you could offer a handy amendment that would kill this bill pretty much on sight if you just simply said that that the pilot program could not involve computer technology at all. That the pilot program would have to get kids off computer learning, because we saw how great that worked during NTI days. So they got to get off of that, and then we can do this pilot program. Because if they did that, then at that point, the lobbyist, well, he's no longer representing his client because they make money off selling the program. So if the program ends up getting cut out of this pilot, instead it's just a pilot where they administer hard documents and outlines and syllabus material to parents for them to work through with their kids, well, then his client ain't making the money, so the computer portion's really important. Offer that amendment and then make all these legislators vote saying they would prefer kids to learn on computers than with their parents off hard copy things. And I don't think there's a lot of legislators that like to say that. That's for sure. So I don't want to run out of time. I want to make sure I cover the main bill, that the big news story about House Bill 2 passing in committee, the school choice amendment passing. Now, for those who unaware, some background or what have you, that there was two amendments proposed. One was House Bill, was it 208? The other was House Bill 2. House Bill 2 was always destined to move forward. And a little background on how this happened. So they called basically an emergency committee hearing on Tuesday of the Education Committee to go through this. And one of the things they passed was, in fact, this amendment forward, but it did have changed language. I'll wrap around to the change of the language and stuff to pass it forward. Then, after they got that passed forward last night, they then called it forward to the floor today for a vote, which is technically against the rules, unless, of course, they just ignore their rules, which is what they did. But by doing that, they ended the possibility of offering amendments onto this constitutional amendment. So the way this works, you have to get at least 60 votes in the House. And then over in the Senate, it's 60% you have to get at least. And if it passes that, which over in the House is 22.8. So 23 votes in the Senate it has to get. And if it gets 23 votes in the Senate, then this automatically moves forward to be a ballot measure for the citizens of Kentucky to get to vote on whether they want yes or no on this come November. And so it looks like this is moving forward. Like I said, it passed the House, but they had to do it. They did it. They didn't have to, but they chose to in order to shut down anybody putting forward amendments on this, trying to change this for several reasons that we'll talk about probably tomorrow. But they decided to do this in such a way that there couldn't be amendments offered, and that a lot of people were trying to figure out what it was changed to coming into this meeting. Because you see, House Bill 2 had problems before, and this is why they weren't calling it forward exactly as it sat. And a big problem of House Bill 2, it's got two problems that people will argue will cause this to either fail or not be very good, or actually get ruled as ineligible to be on the ballot by our Kentucky Supreme Court, because they already hate school choice, the Kentucky Supreme Court does, so they'll do anything probably to get rid of this. And this does leave open the opportunity. I'll talk about why in our next segment. But this bill before directly said it would allow, and this was a big sticking point. So one, it didn't have language, ballot language in it that was super clear in the first place. And then two, it offered in the amendment to allow discrimination based upon zip code. So whether or not you would get school choice, it enabled the legislature within the Constitution, hard wrote in the Constitution, to say that they could say that this zip code gets school choice, this zip code doesn't get school choice, and that was a big sticking point. Remember, we're talking about constitutional language, and it's very important when you're putting forward constitutional language. It's very hard to change into the future, and getting it right the first time around, because it ain't something you can clean up. All the time they pass legislation and then they say, well, we'll clean that up, or if there's some issue with it, we'll clean it up. We hear that all the time. I mean, most of the time it's hollow words, but we hear it. And so, but constitutional amendments aren't something you can clean up in post. It's not something that you can make look better later, because the sheer process, it goes to a ballot initiative. And then millions of dollars are spent on pushing forward this amendment to get people to vote yes or vote no on it. And so it did pass. It passed with, I believe, 65 yays, I do believe, 65 yays. So it did overcome the 60 threshold it needed, but there was some people, even self-identifying, quote-unquote, conservative liberty people that are against it. We'll go over what their concerns are after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. So we've been talking about House Bill 2, the constitutional amendment to allow school choice in Kentucky. So right now we can't even have, and this kind of played out on the floor. Like I said, I'll talk about it tomorrow, but we can't really even have a discussion about school choice, because the Supreme Court has ruled it's unconstitutional. No matter what your thoughts are, possible ways to handle it or not, possible remedies, possible programs, what they should look like. Should it be charter only? Should they involve full-fledged voucher system? So on and so forth. It doesn't really matter what you think. We can't have that debate because it's not allowed according to our Supreme Court in constitutional ruling here. And so what we end up with now is a position where we have to pass this before we can have a substantive debate on what is a good program or not. And so when we look at the legislation, so it did change coming out of committee, and I think it needed to change in order to get the votes, because it only passed with 65 yays. And so if it lost 6 people, it would have failed. It wouldn't have moved forward. And so what it said before was, notwithstanding the provisions of Section 171, 183, 184, 186, and 189, the General Assembly may provide financial support for the education students outside the system of common schools. The General Assembly may exercise this authority by law in particular places as it deems proper. And it's this last part here, the General Assembly may exercise this authority by law in particular places as it deems proper. That was a big issue with the bill to a lot of people who were against this particular amendment. And if this amendment as wrote came forward, it would have failed, because I know for a fact there's more than 6 legislators that were against this amendment as wrote. And it's because of may exercise this authority by law in particular places as it deems proper. That really opens up the door for a whole lot of, maybe Louisville gets it, maybe they don't. Maybe this area gets it, maybe it doesn't. And particular places, right? That could be down to zip code. It could be down to street. They could say this street gets school choice, nobody else does. And so that was a big problem. So what they ended up actually moving out of committee and what ended up actually being passed says instead, the General Assembly may provide financial support for the education of students outside the system of common schools. The General Assembly may exercise this authority by law. Sections 59, 60, 171, 183, 184, 186, and 189 of this Constitution notwithstanding. So they took out in particular places. Now, granted though, when we look at those sections, what we see, and you notice that list is a little bit longer, they're ignoring the section of the Constitution that says you can't have laws in particular places. That is one part that they're saying notwithstanding. So it still allows, to a degree, for them to say, okay, Louisville as a whole could get school choice, but this area doesn't. But that would involve still legislation to be passed. It doesn't say in there in particular places now. And so by removing that, it kind of removes this fear of like by per se zip code or by street or by some sort of formula of sorts. And instead it puts it in where it could say, if you have beyond X population in the county, you can then engage in this. And for those people who are against any kind of idea like that, it could be something where somebody in leadership just wants it that way, but it could be that they couldn't get the votes from the rural folks unless they put something in there, because some of these rural schools and rural Republicans, and we heard from some of them on the floor, are against school choice for a very specific reason. And I've used this example of Garrett County. Some people in Garrett County may be against school choice that are otherwise conservatives because they have a public school system that relies on students to go to it. But if you start allowing school choice, well, people in Garrett County now, they work in Richmond, they work in Lexington, they work in Nicholas, they could work in all kinds of different places. A lot of times they don't work in Garrett County. Well, they can easily now drop their kids off at a school in Lexington that is available to them through the school choice program. And then that detracts kids out of this rural Garrett County area. And so this legislation maybe to buy over some of those rural votes. And that's a real concern of rural areas and setting up a proper school choice system. But at the same time, you don't want some kid to be denied the opportunity to have the full and complete school choice because they live in Garrett County versus living in Lexington County. I'm sure, the parents of kids in Garrett County would look at that and say, that's not very fair. But that would be something that can now be handled. Assuming this passes, assuming it passes on the ballot, you can now have that argument and legislation passed. But the fact that it allows for it, and it's not full and complete school choice everywhere if they pass any kind of legislation on it, is a reason why some conservative people were against the legislation. There's another reason why conservative people are against this version of the bill, because it could very possibly be ruled as not allowed. So there's a ruling out of our Supreme Court that says constitutional amendments must be clear, essentially what it says. Constitutional amendments must be clear about what they're doing. So there was something called like the Macy's Law, I believe is what it's called, that was voted on, passed, but then wasn't allowed to be put on the ballot because it was so convoluted, the language, that the average Kentuckian couldn't understand what they were saying. This could be running into the same issues because, once again, reading it out, the General Assembly may provide financial support for the education of students outside the system of common schools. The General Assembly may exercise this authority by law. Sections 59, 60, 171, 183, 184, 186, and 189 of this Constitution notwithstanding. So the argument would be the average citizen doesn't know what notwithstanding means. They don't know that means they can ignore those constitutional amendments. But then also, very obvious argument, I just read them out for you. Please, anybody in the audience, ask yourselves right now, do you know at the top of your head what sections 59, 60, 171, 183, 184, 186, and 189 of the Kentucky Constitution actually say? Do you know what parts of it they're now allowed to set to the side in order to put forward legislation on school choice? You probably don't. And that's part of the problem, is that you could see a Supreme Court come in and rule that, look, the average voter has no clue what those sections of the Constitution mean. They have no clue what this legislation actually physically does. Now, of course, we both know come campaign season, both sides will make it very clear what the legislation does. There won't be anybody be like, what, you mean to tell me by doing that I voted to allow tax dollars to go to parochial schools? I didn't know that. No, trust me, there'll be plenty of ads ran to make sure you understand that's what it says. But it also goes into, as well, just kind of looking at this as a whole, it really goes into the idea that this is up for the Kentuckians to decide. This is up for the people to decide. Maybe you do want to allow tax dollars to go to parochial schools. The Democrats made a lot of claims on the floor. Nobody will want that. They don't want their tax dollars going to private schools. Well, unless, of course, they're allowed to go to the private schools, and then in case they might be for it. And they know that. That's why they were so against this actually question getting put forward to the people. If they're so positive that this constitutional amendment will fail, why do they have such a big problem with it in the first place? That'd be an obvious and straightforward question. So for those reasons, it could be ruled unconstitutional. But yet we saw basically all the conservative members voting yes on this piece of legislation. And the reason why is because it is something they can actually work with. I do believe that's why they did it. Because it is something to say, you know what? Okay, they took out particular area. Yeah, they can still kind of do it regional, but at least as I'm sitting here, we can have that fight later. And there's no guarantee, because what would have happened if you'd voted no and you were a conservative, a person who's in a district that says, I am for school choice? Because there were people messaging people who are for school choice, asking them to vote no because they didn't like the amendment. All these people for school choice. Good luck explaining that to the average voter, why you voted no, the nuances of it. So if it's something that you can swallow, that provides you the opportunity, you might as well take, because there's no guarantee that in 2 years, if this failed, they wouldn't come up again for like 2 years. And then if in 2 years it did come up on a ballot again, there's no guarantee that it wouldn't have the same language and same vote. And then if you're somebody who did vote no on this, and you're in a conservative district, you're in a pro-school choice district, you got to hope you have the money to explain why you voted no on this in a clear and concise way, and you most likely don't. And so now this leads to them being able to take out representatives that did have an issue with it in the first place, and now they're able to pass it anyways forward. You're in a lose-lose situation. You got some of what you wanted done, and what you have now, yes, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, and it sucks that you can't get constitutional language that's perfect. But at the same time, it's not killing school choice. Sure, it enables them to do it by regional areas, but they still have to get a law through that says they can do it by areas after this. And so the fight still continues on that. I said I'd get to Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. I wasn't able to. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow, as well as looking at the floor debate on this, as well as trying to dig into the budget if we have time. I thank y'all so much for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.